What is up, mansion builders? Today, I want to talk to you about the strategy that we use in order to get really high appraisals. And there's actually a lot of different things that I'll be breaking down today, and this is what we do. And it makes a massive difference. If you do this well and you get a great appraisal, then your loan gets super easy. Raising money from investors gets super easy. But if you don't put in the work, right? Like I'll show you how you could literally lose $100,000+ on this, or be able to not do your deal, or both, not do your deal and lose $100,000+. And you've already spent 6-12 months on this kind of deal. So this is kind of what it looks like when you are getting your stuff together for your loan. There's 4 things that you have to have ready, right? You have to have your plans. And so that's your architectural stuff, that's your engineering stuff. You could spend $70,000 to $120,000 on these plans. All right, that's first thing. Second thing is your permits. Permits can take 6 to 9 months to do after you already spent 3 to 6 months on architect and engineers and all that kind of stuff. So crazy amounts of time, already a year here, maybe $10,000, $20,000 on permits. Sometimes you have crazy impact fees and utility connection fees, and it might be substantially more. All right, so that's plans and permits. A year and over $100,000 you could invest into this. And then the third thing that you need to get is your hard bid. So a builder to go through, build out a line item contract for you and say, here's what we're gonna do, here's the scope of work, here is a hard number for this, because you're gonna have to submit all this stuff to the bank. Okay, those first 3 things, I like to get those done in that order. And then third is order the appraisal. So appraisal is about maybe $8,000, a commercial appraisal to do something like this. It's not, crazy amount of time. It takes probably 2 to 3 weeks to get this back. But in order to do the appraisal, you really kind of need the first 3 things lined up so that you can submit and show all these things to the appraiser. So if you get all the way through this, right, these 4 things, you get to the bank, you submit everything, you'll get your final approval for your loan. But if you get all the way to the last step and you screw up the appraisal, or the appraisal comes back bad, real bad, then everything that you've done prior to that could just be thrown out the window, right? There's $100,000 that I spent on plans and permits and all that kind of stuff, and my deal just blew up. So I want to unpack what we do to prepare for this so that you knock the appraisal out of the park, and then it lines everything up for the bank and for investors to make everything smooth. All right, so let's talk about this appraisal. And the appraisals that we've had done and our teams have had done, they're called as complete appraisals. And really what that means is there's 2 parts to this. There is the real estate part, right? They'll say this is the future value of your real estate after you've built it. That's why you have to have your plans. That's why you have to have your permits and a hard bid. So they can say, okay, well, here's what it costs to build, and this is what it's gonna look like, right? So your future building, say a year from now, when it's built, this is the value, right? So they're gonna take one component of the appraisal, that's that. The second component of your appraisal is your future business. What is your future business going to be worth? And so you need to have a bunch of data and tools and stuff for that, right? They're gonna say after you've built, you're stabilizing, that first year you're going through, filling up your grandmas, getting everything together, what does it look like really after 1 year of operating, your stabilized number? So they're gonna take those 2 things, the value of your future building and the value of your future business when it's stabilized, and put those 2 numbers together and say, this is your as complete appraisal. That's what they will give to the bank. And this is a really, really important number, right? If you mess this up, it gets real hard. If you knock this out of the park, then everything runs really smooth. So when most people are doing appraisals and they're used to these kind of things, they're used to, single family residential kind of stuff, right? You're going to buy a house, you order an appraisal. You go to sell your house, the buyer orders an appraisal, right? And say you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,700 square foot house in, so-and-so neighborhood. They're gonna go and look at the MLS, and they're gonna pull similar size, similar age, similar, niceness in a half-mile or so range, right? And they'll pull up a whole bunch of comps, and they'll say, okay, well, these are bigger, these are smaller, oh, these 3, these are great comps, right? And it's pretty simple. When you go and look at assisted livings, man, it is not simple at all. It is actually really hard to do comps for these because, man, the assisted living space is transitioning a lot. So you have a lot of the old school nursing home products built in the 60s, 70s, even 80s and 90s. the 8-foot hallways, the long, gross things that are now structurally obsolete. They're literally knocking these things down. Tons of comps like that, right? Those are bad comps. Those are not apples to apples. Those are not your product. So you have those things that are really kind of distractions, pulling the comps really, really low because no one wants those products anymore. Those are out there. And then the alternative is you have the big smelly facilities, right? So you have a lot of those kind of things that are out there. Those a lot of times can be nice, but a lot of times not that nice looking. And then the third item is you have all these dinky little RALs. And so you may have some home conversion that may have 10 or 16 beds in it, right? And a lot of times those are much lower value as well than something that's purpose built. So to get, a new construction mansion, something that we do, right? Each of our buildings are about 10,000 square feet. And then we built out a neighborhood of those. So if you're trying to comp a neighborhood of mansions that are built out, purpose built for end of life care and their luxury, like, dude, there's like no comps for this kind of stuff. So I want to tell you that first and foremost, it is hard to get great comps for a product like this. And a lot of times you have to scrub through the existing comps. And it's really important that you say, hey, you know what? These over here, not applicable. Those are crappy physical buildings. They're outdated. They're old. They are not our style. They're not our license type, all the different things. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But it's actually pretty hard to get comps for this that are like product and new. And so actually a lot of the comps that were pulled for my appraisal were far away. They were like 3+ hours away. I had stuff in Dallas. I had stuff in other areas that were, it's like, man, this is not close to me. And all of the comps that did come up, there's not a lot of assisted livings that sell, in the last 6 months, right? So now you're pulling back years of data. And when we would do this, right, it was, through inflation, all this kind of stuff. So there was a lot of variable, and there has been over the last few years. So you have to take a lot of different things into account. And I say this because it's important to understand that this is a difficult thing for appraisers to do. And it really goes back to what kind of bank are you using? Is this their niche? Do they understand this, right? Like we have several different banks that we use. Some of them are just getting into the assisted living space and they really don't understand the model and they don't have an appraisal company that they work with that do end of life care, that do assisted living, that do independent. They're not used to this kind of stuff. And then we have another lender that this is their bread and butter. They're doing these all over the country. And when they call the appraisal company, they have multiple appraisers who have experience in this and have been doing this kind of work for a while. So if you use a bank that is more involved in this niche, in this community, usually they have a appraiser that will come out that knows this niche better and honestly will give you a more accurate appraisal. So in my mind, I think of appraisers in kind of like two categories. You have people that are experts or know really well a local area, or they know really well a local industry if they're on the business side. So here's kind of what I mean by that, right? Like our bank that we use, they're in a totally different state. And my appraiser flew in from Georgia to do this, right? He doesn't know my area at all. He is not an expert in Georgetown, Texas. So it was my role, my job to show him, here's the bad parts of the city, here's the good parts of the city. We are in this, right? When you're looking at comps, these over here, they are inferior. They're in inferior, neighborhoods and those kind of things. He doesn't know where's the good side and the bad side of the city. But what he does know is the industry, right? He knows the difference between assisted living, between independent living, between, memory care, nursing homes, those kind of things. So you kind of need to find out who are you getting as far as your appraisal company. And I do think it's important to ask the bank, even before you order it, who are we getting out here? Are they a local person that may know this, metro area, but has no idea of the industry? I think that is worse. Because you'll come in and they're like, dude, I don't know how to comp these things. And we've had our partners, appraisals, actually call me directly like, Brett, hey, can you talk to this guy? He doesn't know how to do it. All right. And so we've sent our appraisals out like Platinums, and we've sent our other teams to show them, because a lot of times if you don't know this industry, it's confusing on how to do this. And I'm explaining this to you. I literally got on the phone with this one appraiser and was literally talking him through this exact thing that I'm talking you through. Here's how the as complete appraisal goes and all this kind of stuff. Here's my appraisal, right? Like you can connect. I think that guy, this appraiser, actually called my appraiser and asked him how to do it. So I say that because it's confusing. And if you don't have someone in this industry, they may struggle with it and you may get a bad result. So here's what we do in order to make sure that we get a good result. First and foremost, I want to meet the appraiser in person. I want them to come see my building or my site. And as I said, my appraiser was coming from Georgia, right? And this appraiser I talked to on the phone, and he said, hey, you know what, Brett, that's great. I don't need to come out. Send me all your files, send me everything you got, and I'll just do, this virtually, right? And I'm like, no. Like, I need you to come out here to Georgetown, fly out, spend an afternoon with me, walk the land, see the vision, all these kind of things. I need you to understand. And so I actually ended up paying an extra like $2,000, right? I think they had initially quoted me like $6,500, and I'm like, no, I need someone, it doesn't have to be you. I'll get somebody else. I need someone to come out in person and do this appraisal with me. And I just think that is super important. So I paid a couple extra grand to have this person fly out. So that is what I want to do as I am prepping to get this, make my best first impression and really kind of do a lot of the work for the appraisal. So there's multiple tools and homework that I do before the appraiser comes out, and then I'm able to give all this stuff to them. So I talked a little bit about the market, right? If this person knows the industry, but they don't know my market, then as I'm going, I'm pulling up the comps and I'm showing like, here's comps, right? This is a great location. My location is comparable to that. These are bad locations. That's why, they're not making sales. That's why their bed rates are lower. That's why, in this area, some of the comps are lower, right? So I'm sharing the local insider information of the market, right? Talking about the demand here. We happen to have a Sun City right down the street, and a Sun City is this huge retirement community. So I'm explaining, hey, there's a ton of people that are wealthy and retired and they're of this certain age right down here in this this market right here. So I think talking about your market data is super important. And then they're going to look at what is the future value of your building, right? So you need to show them, here's what the building is going to look like. And I want to stress this is super important. So I pulled out my architectural plans, and this is before we had built the mansions. So we met over at Mesa, and I said, hey, it's going to look and feel like this environment, but it's going to be so much more elaborate, and it's going to be huge, and it's going to be gorgeous. And we pulled out the plans, and I spent probably 20 minutes like getting into the weeds. Here's my vision, right? Here's this huge glass walls that we're going to do. We're going to have private rooms. They're going to be huge. They're going to have all these things. And, I just sold him the grandeur and the gorgeousness of this building. And in comparison to, here are the comps around, right? Big smelly facility, dinky little RAL, outdated nursing home, right? These are all crap. Mine is going to be superior to all of these. So when you're looking at price per square foot, price per unit, whatever you're gonna do this, know that mine is gonna be superior to these. And I was really stressing that. I think that's super important. So I had an existing assisted living, right? That I was able to show him and say, hey, here's some of the great things. It's gonna be looking like this. But you may not, and that's totally fine, because after we left there, we drove over to my vacant land, and we literally got in my truck, and it was like 3 feet high of weeds, and we got around, and I just drove him through, and I said, here's the vision, right? Like, it's 7.6 acres. I'm gonna build these buildings over here. It's gonna be facing this way. It has this gorgeous, like, kind of prairie vibe, and I just sold him on the vision. And man, I would do that for sure. I was talking to one of our teams the other day, and they're like, Brett, like, where do I sit down and meet with the guy? I'm like, dude, bring an easy up if you need to. Bring some lawn chairs, bring a cooler, bring your computer, and you sit there and you make sure you're able to share the vision with this person, and they're able to see all of these things. So even if you don't have another assisted living to take them to, for sure, take them out to the land and just show them, here's what is gonna make this special, and here's why we are superior to all these other comps. So that's the real estate valuation part. Then the second component of this is the business valuation part. And there's actually 3 tools that I go and I build out ahead of time before I meet with the appraiser. So let's walk through them. The first thing is I create this chart of all the different license types in my state and what mine is, and then how these compare to pricing. Because as they're going, they're gonna do a market analysis, all right? And they're gonna call, or go on the websites of all these different assisted livings near you to find out, what are the bed rates? And I am better than all of them, just to be blunt, right? Like, we provide better care, I have a better building. So I am superior to all of these, and I wanna show that. I wanna show it in the physical building, but then I also wanna show it in the care side. And here's how that's applicable, because in my state, I'm in Texas, right? I'm gonna walk through, here is, first and foremost, there's independent living. And I created like this chart. So it goes independent living, then it goes, assisted living, kind of lighter levels, then end of life care assisted living, then memory care, and then nursing home. So these kind of pendulum, right? And as you move down the line here, the amount of care needs get higher and the price gets higher, right? So I want to show like, hey, here's me. I'm way down the line here. We have higher care needs, and then therefore we have a higher price. So when you're comparing me to this other assisted living over here, know that we provide different levels of care, and therefore this is why they are $2,000 a month lower of what my price is going to be, and that is okay because they're selling a different service. So we walk through independent living, right? Here's what this looks like. I defined it. I put a little paragraph, probably 3 or 4 sentences. And then I talked about assisted living, and I broke that into 2 different sides. And your state may have actually 2 different types of licenses, right? They may have like group home, they might have assisted living facility. Here in Texas, it's a type A and it's a type B. And type A is lighter levels of care. You are able to fully egress yourself out the building, anytime in an emergency. So, it doesn't mean that you're bedridden, you're not dying there. It doesn't mean that you can't follow commands. You can do all of those things. You can leave an emergency. But a type B assisted living here is that you are not able to egress on your own, and you can be here through end of life, right? They call it aging in place. So even though it is assisted living, there's a drastic difference between a type A and a type B. And I want to make that completely clear. I want to educate him on it and then download the list from the state's website. Here is all the comps, right? And you can see here's the type A, here's the type B, right? Here's the independent, here's, whatever else it is. Here's the memory care. And so that I can say, okay, let's look over here. You're showing it's $5,500 for, room rent over here. Well, they're a type A, right? When people decline, they have to actually move them out of there and move them to a place like mine. So I am more care, more end of life, right? So I show that. And then after the assisted living side, there's the memory care side. And at least here in Texas, you have to have an Alzheimer's certificate in addition to your type B assisted living license. So I'm saying, hey, here's what this looks like. It means there are specific regulations that we have to follow. There is, magnet locks on the doors. Our building is physically different because of the security measures. Our staffing requirements for, training and things like that are different and higher on this kind of side as well. And as you move from assisted living to memory care, the price goes up at least $1,000 a month. Some places like $2,000 a month. So, Mr. Appraiser, just consider when you are comping end-of-life care over here without memory care, it's cheaper. And when you look at the other Alzheimer's or memory care units, this is what my service is going to be. My product's still probably going to be better, but at least my service is apples to apples on this, right? And then, so that's what I'm saying. Here's me, here's my license type that I'm getting for this, and here's how that compares to the other, facilities in my area. And then past me is nursing homes, right? It's an actual nurse is on staff, and that is really the only thing that is past me. There are a few residents that we are not able to take because they need, high levels of medical care. We're not taking those kind of residents, but pretty much 90% of everyone, even through end of life, through hospice, all of those kind of things, we can have them in our facility. So that's an important one, comparing apples to apples and showing, hey, these comps over here, those are oranges, man. That is not what we do. It's a different service. Then the next tool I want to do is I want to help them with their market research. They are going to go and secret shop, usually via phone call or just going on the website, all the competition around you. And so may call dinky little facilities, they may call big smelly facilities. Who knows what they're going to call, right? But honestly, right, when you call all the facilities, usually have some front desk lady answers, and they say, oh, let me transfer you to the sales and marketing person. And then they transfer you and it phone rings and you get voicemail. And that's honestly usually what happens, right? Appraisals will go, they're not going to put in the amount of work that you would put in. And this is why I pretty much do their homework for them. So I will go and I will find out apples to apples, right? For a private room with a bathroom, something similar to what I'm going to build in a luxury place even, what is the bed rate there? So matching physical product and then matching the service. Now, what does it look like for end of life care and memory care? So when you're going and comping the big smelly facility and they have 4 stories, they have 2 levels of independent living, they got assisted living, and then they have, their little 20 bed lockdown unit of memory care. That's what I want to know. What does that look like, right? And if they have levels of care for that, then what is the highest it gets? Because we pretty much take grandmas all the way through the end. So what is the highest it gets, right? Does it get to $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a month? That's what I want to write down. I want to say I talked to, this place, their memory care private room was $9,500 a month. And I talked to Betty on such and such date, right? And I'll go through, and that's just one of my comps, and I'll list all my different comps around me. And then I actually make notes on them and I'll say, hey, this is new construction. They just built this, a year or two ago. And I'll say different things. I'll actually say like, this place is known for like the worst care in our city and they can't keep their beds full and they've trained their medical director 3 times in the last 6 months and like stuff. I mean, that's real information if you're an insider and you know the industry, but I'm showing like, hey, you know what? Their prices are low over here because they're 65% occupied because they've turned their medical director 3 times and they have a horrible reputation and everyone says, don't go there, right? Like he would not know that information. But I would, right? If I knew my market or if I was great at secret shopping or if I got plugged into my community and started talking to the hospice and home health companies, all that kind of stuff. So learn that stuff and it's super important so that you can say, here is the most applicable comps to me, right? Great product, private room, end of life or memory care. These other ones over here, dinky little RLs are not gonna even come close to what we do. The outdated, smelly facilities that have a terrible reputation and can't sell beds, not even close to what we're gonna do. These are, inferior to what our product is. Here, these right here, we're matching comp for comp for the nicest and best care in our market. All right, so the third tool is the Performa. They want to see a very detailed Performa broken out, so showing all of your income, the rents, showing the bed move-in fees, anything like that, right? Then line items showing all of your expenses and your labor and your overhead. How does it all look? And then your net profit after mortgage and stuff like that. They want to give a value to your future business. And so they need to know, what is your occupancy going to be like? What is your marketing strategy? They will actually dig in a lot on your marketing strategy and you got to know what's going on here. So we talk about, here's the strategic 20. Here's what we do. Here is how we get endless referrals from, all of our people that are friends with us and know us in the community. So we talk about that. I actually share a lot of my data to our teams. And man, I just built out this document the other day and our occupancy was like 95.6 last year, 97 the year before, 98.1 the year before. Like we are almost 100% full, literally the entire year. And that goes back to the marketing strategy. So they want to know, how dialed in are your numbers? How dialed in is your marketing strategy? Because if you say, hey, we're going to have, 90% occupancy, how likely are you? Because a lot of times, a lot of facilities are either really great at this and they'll keep a wait list, or they're really bad at this and they'll have like 65% occupancy. So which one are you going to be, right? If you're brand new, you might be on the lower side. So they want to use this data to be able to send it off to the bank and say, okay, well, here's what the cash flow is going to be like. Here's what I'm seeing market analysis as far as bed rates, and I'm plugging this all back in. I may make some modifications for this to make it a little bit more conservative. And then from there, I can say, here's what the future business is for, what's going to happen a year from now. And honestly, they give you a very conservative number on what that looks like. So I think for me, they gave me $1 million valuation of each of my mansion businesses. And then my appraisal for the building came back at 5.1 million per building. So it was a total of 6.1 million for the appraisals for each of our mansions. So our buildings were the first of these mansions, right? And then we've teamed with people across the country and they're literally copying and pasting the mansions and the business plan. And so we have provided our appraisal to our teams in order to really share and equip it with their appraisers. And now fast forward a couple years, we now have a whole bunch of appraisals back from a lot of our teams that have the exact same buildings. And we are now seeing our appraisals nationally start to creep up a little and a little, right? From mine at 6.1 into like the mid 6s a few, 6 months ago or a year ago. And then now we're breaking the 7s on some of our appraisals coming back. And that's for one building, 7+ million. Right? So what we're seeing is we are now having our own comps. So I'm collecting all of these different appraisals in multiple different states and sending it to our teams so that they can say, hey, here's my comps, right? Like it is hard to find new construction mansions anywhere in my area, but you know what? Here's 5 of them that have been built and it's the exact same physical building, right? And then they're going on and sharing the virtual tour of our mansion and just walking through and saying, we're building this exact product. And it's so cool because now we're seeing just, appraisal creep and creep and creep, and they get higher and higher and higher. So this is something that's so cool that, we're able to help these teams really get off the ground and get the funding and the investor stuff done. So let me talk about that next, because if this goes poorly for you with the banks, it has a bunch of huge challenges. You could have an appraiser come back pretty low and I mean, the bank could just say, no, we're going to pull the plug. Like, this deal doesn't pencil, right? We want to back away from this. Or they may say, hey, you know what? You need to now come up with this higher down payment. It might be hundreds of thousands of dollars more as part of a down payment. And that could be really hard to swallow after you've already, used your life savings or raised investor funds and it comes back super low. Or they may say, hey, you know what? It became back lower. So now we need another guarantor on, the loan. So, somebody who has 20% or more has to personally guarantee, right? They're on the hook for the loan, but it may be like, that's not good enough, right? The collateral came back lower, so we want another strong borrower to go and guarantee on the loan as well. And now you have to have some hard conversation. Who do you, essentially help guarantee this loan? And if things go bad, they're on the hook for it. Or you may have additional collateral needs, meaning you have to put your house up as collateral. You have to put your rental properties up as collateral. I've seen people have to go and get, additional life insurance policies to put that up as collateralization. But if these things go really well, all of that stuff goes away, right? For myself specifically, no additional collateral, right? Just the collateralization of the real property, right? The land and the future building that we're building. Nothing else was required because our appraisal came back awesome, right? 6.1 for each building. So it was like 12.2 for our phase one, 2 mansions. So we were building at so much less than that, about 8 million on phase one. And then we'll need to come up with another maybe 4.5 million for phase two. So it's front loaded, right? I have to do 2/3 of the work on phase one and then I come back. And so really it averages to about 3 million in hard cost to build each of our mansions with a $6 million valuation, right? We're literally building at 50%. Awesome things you can do there. And that really ties into the investor part of this. As you're going through and raising money, a lot of the success of you raising money is going to be based on this appraisal. As you are working through the process, you may have investors on the front side that are committed, or you may get all the way through this, get your appraisal done, get loan pre-qualification, and then go and raise more money or raise all the money. But what investors want to see is, one, you got your plans and permits. They want to see what the building looks like. They want to know that you're ready to build. Then they want to see, what does it cost to build, right? Does it cost $2.5 million, $3 million to build this mansion? And then what is it going to be worth, right? And from there, if you're building and it costs too much to build this relative to what it's worth, then they're going to back out of the deal. But if you're building and you have 50% loan to cost, then you're in a huge, awesome position because there's safety there, right? Their money is tied to this real property. And a lot of the ROI, when you get split, a lot of that money is on the backside of the real estate play. So you're going to get the cash flow, right? They're going to get a certain percentage of that, paid quarterly or whatever it looks like. And that's great. But a lot of the big money comes when you go to sell or cash out refinance. And that's when the investor gets their big chunk of this. And so if you say, hey, your big chunk is going to be, similar to the appraisal we just got, but you know what, that came back really low. It should have been higher, but I think it's going to be higher. You'll put their money into the pro forma. Let's say they're investing 200,000. And then you take all the numbers and everything. You say, okay, well, here's your cash on cash return, or here's your IRR, right? And now it might be like, 8, 10%. It's like, oh, that's not great. But if your appraisal came back strong, if you're hitting $7 million on these valuations, and then, you still are going to wait another 4 years of appreciation after that, man, you know what? You take that same number, now you have a new sale price or cash out refinance price. And now that, 10% IRR hits 20+% IRR. And it's like, man, like here's a fantastic return for you, right? You have the safety on here and you have this huge return. That's a good deal. And it makes it much, much easier to raise funds when you have a great appraisal. So I know this one was a bit in the weeds and might be over your head for some people, but it is so important when you're digging into this to make sure you put in the time and the hard work to dial in the appraisal. If you want to learn more about this stuff, reach out to our team, book a call, assistedlivingmansion.com, and I will see you guys on the next one.